Millionaire cries when black waitress makes his disabled son dance like never before. Marcus Wellington III sat rigid in his $1,000 suit, watching his 10-year-old son David through the restaurant window. The boy hadn't spoken in 3 months, not since the accident that left him wheelchair-bound and trapped in silence. Marcus had built an empire worth billions, but couldn't buy his son's smile back. His wife had left, claiming he cared more about stock prices than their child's recovery. The exclusive restaurant was supposed to be a quiet dinner, away from prying eyes and whispered judgments. Marcus gripped his phone, checking market updates to avoid looking at David's empty stare. "Sir, your table is ready," the hostess announced, her voice cutting through his mental armor. The dining room buzzed with the quiet conversations of society's elite, but David remained motionless, staring at his untouched meal. Marcus felt the familiar weight of helplessness crushing his chest. He had hired the best therapists, visited countless specialists, thrown money at every possible solution. Nothing worked. His son existed in a world Marcus couldn't penetrate, no matter how many zeros were in his bank account. The other diners glanced over occasionally, their expressions mixing pity with curiosity. Marcus wanted to shield David from their stares, but even his protective instincts felt inadequate. He reached across the table, touching his son's hand briefly before David pulled away. Keisha Johnson approached their table with practiced grace, her server's smile genuine despite the long shift ahead. She had worked at Le Bernardin for 2 years, saving every tip to support her grandmother and pay for nursing school. At 24, she understood struggle in ways these wealthy patrons never would. Her grandmother had taught her that every person deserved dignity, regardless of their circumstances. As she neared the Wellington table, she noticed the small boy's withdrawn posture and the man's desperate eyes. Something about the scene reminded her of her younger brother, who had autism, and the way her family had learned to reach him through unexpected moments of connection. "Good evening, gentlemen," Keisha said softly, her voice carrying warmth that seemed to cut through the restaurant's formal atmosphere. David looked up briefly, and she caught a glimpse of intelligence behind his guarded expression. Marcus straightened, preparing his usual dismissive response to serve his staff, but something in Keisha's presence made him pause. She knelt slightly, bringing herself to David's eye level without making a show of it. "I love your sneakers," she said quietly, noticing the boy's superhero-themed shoes beneath the table. David's fingers twitched slightly, the first voluntary movement Marcus had seen in weeks. Keisha didn't push, simply maintained her gentle presence as she took their order, treating David with the same respect she showed his father. The restaurant's pianist began playing a soft jazz melody, but Keisha hummed along to a different rhythm as she worked. Her grandmother had always said music was the universal language, capable of reaching souls that words couldn't touch. During her break, she noticed David's head turning slightly toward the kitchen, where the staff radio played a contemporary R&B song. His foot began tapping almost imperceptibly against his wheelchair's footrest. Marcus followed his son's gaze, confusion crossing his features as he tried to understand what had captured David's attention. The sound was muffled, barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise, but something about it seemed to resonate with the boy. Keisha made a decision that could cost her job. She approached the manager, explaining what she had observed, and requested permission to try something unconventional. The manager, initially skeptical, agreed after seeing the desperation in Marcus's eyes and the subtle response David had shown to the music. She asked the pianist to pause and requested that the kitchen radio be turned up slightly. The rhythm of the R&B song filled the dining room, causing several patrons to look around in surprise. David's response was immediate. His shoulders began moving slightly, his head bobbing to the beat. Marcus watched in amazement as his son showed signs of life for the first time since the accident. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. David's hands began moving, his fingers drumming against his wheelchair's armrests in perfect time with the music. Other diners stopped their conversations, drawn to the unexpected scene unfolding before them. Keisha began moving to the rhythm herself, her natural grace turning the moment into something beautiful rather than spectacle. She had learned from her brother that sometimes breakthrough came not through force, but through finding the right frequency to connect. Her movements were subtle, respectful, designed to encourage rather than perform. David's eyes followed her, and for the first time in months, a smile ghosted across his lips. Marcus felt his carefully constructed emotional walls beginning to crack. His son was responding to a young black woman's instinctive kindness in ways that hundreds of thousands of dollars in therapy had failed to achieve. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent his life believing that money could solve any problem. Yet this breakthrough came from something that couldn't be purchased. Tears began forming in his eyes as he watched David's growing animation. The other patrons seemed to fade away as Marcus focused entirely on his son's emerging joy. Keisha continued her gentle encouragement, creating a safe space for David to express himself without judgment or expectation. The moment felt sacred, transcending the boundaries of class, race, and circumstance that typically divided their worlds. David's wheelchair began rolling slightly as he moved to the music, his whole body now engaged with the rhythm. Keisha, recognizing the breakthrough moment, gently encouraged him by mirroring his movements while standing beside his chair. She had seen this transformation before with her brother, the moment when music unlocked something that had been trapped inside. The other restaurant patrons watched in stunned silence as the disabled boy began expressing himself with a freedom that seemed impossible moments before. Marcus gripped the table's edge, overwhelmed by the sight of his son's emerging vitality. The expensive restaurant setting seemed surreal as this profound moment unfolded, challenging every assumption about healing and connection. The dance evolved naturally, with Keisha following David's lead rather than trying to direct him. Her movements were fluid but respectful, creating a partnership that honored his autonomy while providing gentle encouragement. David's laughter suddenly filled the air, a sound Marcus hadn't heard since before the accident. The boy's hands moved expressively, his upper body swaying with increasing confidence as he found his rhythm. Other staff members had gathered at the kitchen doorway, watching the scene with tears in their eyes. Even the usually reserved patrons seemed moved by the raw authenticity of the moment. The dance wasn't professional or polished, but it was pure and real in a way that cut through social pretense. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor as emotion overwhelmed him. Tears streamed down his face as he watched his son come alive in ways he had thought were lost forever. The billionaire who commanded boardrooms and influenced markets found himself powerless before the simple beauty of human connection. He approached David's wheelchair, kneeling beside it as he had seen Keisha do earlier. "Can Daddy dance too?" he asked, his voice breaking with vulnerability. David nodded enthusiastically, reaching out to take his father's hand. The three of them, billionaire, waitress, and disabled child, began moving together, creating a moment of unity that transcended every barrier society had constructed between them. The restaurant erupted in spontaneous applause as other diners were moved to join the celebration. What had begun as an intimate breakthrough had become a collective affirmation of human potential and dignity. Keisha stepped back slightly, allowing father and son their moment while remaining close enough to continue providing support. She understood that her role was to facilitate, not to claim credit for David's breakthrough. The music continued, and David's joy became infectious, spreading throughout the room as people witnessed the power of compassion and authentic connection. Marcus looked at Keisha with gratitude that went beyond words, recognizing that she had given him back his son through nothing more than kindness and intuitive understanding. As the music faded and the applause died down, Marcus pulled Keisha aside, his voice thick with emotion. "How did you know?" he asked, desperate to understand how she had reached his son when expensive specialists had failed. Keisha's response was simple but profound. "I saw him, not his disability. My brother taught me that everyone has their own language. You just have to be willing to listen." Her words hit Marcus like a physical blow, forcing him to confront his own assumptions about healing, connection, and the value of human insight over financial resources. He realized that in his frantic search for solutions, he had been treating David's condition as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be understood. The conversation continued as Marcus learned about Keisha's background, her struggle to support her family while pursuing nursing school, her experience caring for her autistic brother, and her grandmother's wisdom about treating every person with dignity. Each revelation challenged Marcus's worldview more deeply. Here was a woman who possessed insights that his money couldn't buy, wisdom that his privilege couldn't access. She had given freely what he couldn't purchase, and the contrast forced him to examine his entire approach to life and relationships. David watched from his wheelchair, still glowing from the breakthrough, unaware that his dance had initiated a transformation in his father as well. Marcus made an impulsive decision that would change multiple lives. He offered to pay for Keisha's nursing school education, but she initially refused, not wanting charity. "It's not charity," Marcus insisted. "It's an investment in someone who clearly has gifts that the world needs." Their negotiation became a deeper conversation about dignity, opportunity, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. Keisha eventually agreed, but only if Marcus would also establish a fund to help other service workers pursue education. The deal they struck was more than financial. It was a compact to use resources for genuine human development rather than mere display of wealth. The evening's events had revealed uncomfortable truths about Marcus's life. He had been so focused on accumulating wealth that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. His son's breakthrough had come not from expensive treatments, but from genuine human connection offered by someone society might consider beneath his notice. The irony was devastating and liberating simultaneously. As he watched David continuing to move to the rhythm still playing in his head, Marcus understood that healing couldn't be purchased. It could only be facilitated through authentic care and understanding. The young black waitress had taught him more about his own son in one evening than years of expensive therapy sessions. Within hours, a video of David's dance had spread across social media, posted by moved restaurant patrons who had witnessed the transformation. The footage showed the exact moment of breakthrough: a disabled child finding joy, a father discovering his son anew, and a young black woman facilitating miracle through simple kindness. The video's caption read, "Billionaire son dances for first time since accident, thanks to Waitress who saw his potential." Comments poured in from viewers around the world, sharing their own stories of breakthrough, connection, and the power of seeing beyond surface circumstances. The video became a symbol of hope and human possibility that transcended racial and economic boundaries. Marcus watched the video's viral spread with mixed emotions. Part of him wanted to protect his family's privacy, but he also recognized the power of David's story to inspire others. The comments section revealed hundreds of families dealing with similar challenges, thanking them for sharing such a vulnerable moment. Parents of disabled children reached out, asking for advice and sharing their own breakthroughs. The video had become larger than their personal story. It represented the possibility of connection across any barrier. Marcus realized that David's dance had become a gift to countless families struggling with their own challenges. The media attention that followed was intense, but largely positive. News outlets wanted to interview all three participants, focusing on the story of unexpected connection and breakthrough. Marcus used the platform to highlight the importance of treating service workers with dignity and investing in educational opportunities for deserving individuals. Keisha became an advocate for families dealing with autism and disabilities, using her newfound platform to share practical strategies for connection and understanding. David, still largely nonverbal, had become an inadvertent symbol of human potential and the power of being truly seen by another person. The story's impact extended far beyond social media. The restaurant became a destination for families with disabled children, hoping to recreate the magic of that evening. Keisha completed her nursing degree with Marcus's support and specializes in pediatric care for children with developmental challenges. Marcus restructured his foundation to focus on educational opportunities and accessibility initiatives. The three of them maintained their friendship, with David continuing to dance whenever he heard the right music. Their story became a lasting testament to the truth that the most profound transformations often come not from expensive solutions, but from the simple act of seeing and valuing each other's humanity. Months later, Marcus stood in the same restaurant, watching David perform for a charity event supporting families with disabled children. The boy had progressed far beyond that first breakthrough, developing his own unique style of expression that incorporated both movement and limited speech. His confidence had grown exponentially, and he had become an inspiration to other children facing similar challenges. The charity event had raised millions of dollars, but more importantly, it had created a community of support for families who had felt isolated in their struggles. Marcus no longer saw his wealth as a tool for control, but as a resource for amplifying the kind of human connection that had saved his son. Keisha, now a registered nurse specializing in developmental therapy, had returned to volunteer at the event. She watched David perform with pride, knowing that their first dance had sparked not just his recovery, but a broader movement toward understanding and inclusion. Her approach to patient care had been influenced by that evening's lessons about seeing beyond diagnoses to the person within. She had developed programs that incorporated music and movement into therapy for children with various disabilities. The scholarship fund she and Marcus had established had supported hundreds of students from service industry backgrounds in pursuing healthcare careers. The restaurant itself had been transformed by that evening's events. The management had implemented programs to train staff in disability awareness and had created sensory-friendly dining options for families with special needs children. The piano player now regularly incorporated contemporary music into his repertoire, and the staff had learned to recognize when guests might benefit from a more flexible, compassionate approach to service. The establishment had become known not just for its fine dining, but for its commitment to dignity and inclusion for all patrons. As the evening concluded, Marcus reflected on how profoundly his life had changed. The man who had once measured success solely in financial terms now understood that true wealth lay in human connection and the capacity to see potential in every person. David's dance had been the catalyst for a transformation that extended far beyond their family. It had challenged assumptions about disability, race, class, and the nature of healing itself. The young black waitress who had knelt to his son's level had elevated all of them to a higher understanding of what it meant to be truly human. The legacy of that one dance continued to ripple outward, touching lives and changing perspectives with each telling of their story. David's dance became more than a breakthrough. It became a movement. The video of his transformation reminded the world that healing comes not from wealth, but from the simple act of truly seeing each other. In a society divided by race, class, and circumstance, their story proved that human connection transcends every barrier. What would happen if we all looked beyond surface appearances to see the potential in every person we meet?